folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. I'm just about ready to jump in this creek. I'm telling you, it is awful here today. Heat index, I think, is somewhere close to 110, maybe even over that. I haven't checked in a while, but I'm telling you, it is crazy hot. Got a big old spider crawling up my leg. Been trying to do some more work outside, but it's starting to get to me. 60% humidity, which is a little less than we had yesterday. So I guess that's a good thing. And there's a little bit more breeze, but I'm telling you, it's a little hotter than it was yesterday. So it's I don't know. It doesn't feel too much difference to me. Anyways, the point today is we're going to talk more about what's going on. Food, supply chain issues, markets, general collapse, and then I'll give you some potential tips on some things you might want to be stocking up on, because it's quite possible that these are going to be in some short supply based on what the news is saying, and then just my own opinion, and a few other indicators. Another food facility burned to the ground. Caught ground. I saw this today. Actually, my wife found it and sent it to me. And it caught fire and burned to the ground. I believe it was up in Wisconsin. For those of you that are just saying that this is just normal, here's a chart. This is going back to 2019. And this is showing the increase in burning food plants, warehouses, farms, grain silos, all that. And as you can see, it's going up. Now, this chart here, folks, it only goes up to April. We're now in June, and I can assure you there have been numerous plants burned since April. So it's pretty apparent, just looking at the numbers, that there's been an increase. Does this definitely say that there's something fishy going on? No, of course not. But, I mean, if we're in the middle of a food crisis, if there's all these reasons, whether it be war or climate or drought or, all these other things that they're warning us about food problems, wouldn't you think it would be pretty logical to say, hey, well, wait a minute, why are we having all these plants burned to the ground? Maybe we should investigate. But they're not really. So with that kind of, to me, it means that maybe there's something else going on. I think different than a lot of people, I get it. But it doesn't make any sense that we would have this increase in the burning and destruction of all these food-related facilities at the same time that we're broadcasting around the world. The whole world is saying that we're in the midst of a food catastrophe and a food crisis, and nothing's being done about it. Here's an article, I believe this was back in March or April, and it was talking about that there's just a series of mega disasters, and if these mega disasters keep going, that it could spell a really bad several years for the whole planet when it comes to food. So this isn't anything new, folks. The gas prices just keep going up. I paid $4.79 a gallon yesterday at a gas station, and that's the highest I've ever paid in my life. I know many of you are paying well over $5 and even $6 a gallon, and I feel for you. But just understand that from perspective, this is the highest it's ever been in this area. I've never seen it higher than that. And that hurts just as much as it hurts when you're paying $5 and $6 a gallon. This is not going away anytime too soon. The rumor on the rumor mill is the Fed is getting ready to do a 3/4 point increase on the interest rates, which it might help some, but it's just a telltale sign of a really bad economy, because every time they raise the interest rates, that means the government's debt increases also. Here's some images. I just screenshot these. These are the last 5 days of stock from the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, and the Dow. And I'm not a big market guy anymore, but I can tell you by looking at these numbers, these are not good. There's been billions, if not trillions, actually trillions, because on average, about 1,100 point drop in the stock market equates to around $1.5 trillion in losses. So we're talking a lot of loss here. You know, some of these are between 7 and 10% loss in the last 5 days. This isn't going away anytime too soon. This doesn't necessarily, and I've said before, the stock market isn't necessarily a gauge for the economy. It's something that usually happens because of a bad economy. And we're starting to see that. What it does mean, the one thing I think you can see when you look at it is people are starting to lose faith in the system. They're starting to realize that this is not transitory. This whole economic problem, this whole crisis, the food, the fuel, the supply chain, this isn't transitory. This is something that's kind of set in. It's happening, and it's not going to get any better. Remember what we've talked about in the last couple of months with the whole China shutting down, Shanghai locking down, all that kind of stuff. The Shanghai ports, myself and many others have talked about it a lot over the last couple of months, saying how bad that's going to be to our supply chain. You know, 1/5 of the world's freight ships were stuck in the Shanghai port, the largest port on the planet. Well, a couple of weeks ago, they announced that they were, opening back up. They were going to open back up from their lockdowns, and they were going to let things kind of start going, getting back to normal. Well, guess what? A few days ago, they locked it down again. Had a few positive cases, apparently, and so they have shut Shanghai and Beijing back down. And what does that mean for us? Well, it's just hurting our economy even more. It's hurting our supply chain even more. You can't shut down a major port that supplies a lot of stuff, not everything, but a lot of stuff, and then not to mention all the ships that are stuck there, all the cargo containers stuck there, and then expect it to not have ripple effects all over the world. It most definitely is. We're starting to see that already. There's more and more shortages being reported, predicted, and reported. One of them was popcorn, and that's something I wanted to mention to you that is a great prepping item. In fact, Native Americans, that was one of their main staple food was popcorn, especially during the wintertime, because popcorn stores for a very long time. And while it's not necessarily super nutritious, it's got some good carbs to give you some energy. It's a good food filler. And I've read that in the Native Americans, many times they would eat things like squash and dried meat and fats and stuff in smaller quantities during the wintertime, to get their nutrition. But the big bulk of food that kind of filled up their bellies and gave them their day-to-day energy was popcorn. Popcorn, they're saying looks like it's going to start seeing some shortages of popcorn. Popcorn's actually pretty cheap. You can buy 50-pound bags of popcorn for not too much. So I would highly recommend going out and maybe buying a couple of them. Get you 3 or 4 5-gallon buckets and some Mylar bags. Break those 100-pound, 250-pound bags of popcorn down, and if you broke it down into 3 buckets, you would have some left over, and that some left over would be what you would be, using out of. You'd probably have roughly 10 pounds or so left over. Out of 100 pounds of popcorn in 3 5-gallon buckets, you'd have close to, or a little bit more than 10 pounds. That's a lot of food, actually, and it's a cheap way to buy food, and it looks like it's going to be in short supply. And a lot of you are probably like me, that you're just kind of a popcorn guy. I'd rather have a bag of popcorn and candy bar. Some other things that are happening and that are gonna happen, and this is affected because of, or being affected because of the Shanghai lockdown, and that's medical supplies and medicines. While China doesn't supply everything to us, one thing that China does supply in large percentages is our medicines and our medical supplies. In fact, virtually all over-the-counter medicine comes from either China or India, and a large portion of prescription medications come from there. I remember reading a while back that it's been over 20 years since an antibiotic has been made in the United States. And then things like bandages and Band-Aids and gauze and sutures and needles and syringes and IV tubing and all that kind of stuff, saline and stuff. A huge amount of that, virtually all of it, comes from overseas. And a lot of it's China. And we're already starting to hear At least I am, and I've seen online people talking about that. I had a friend that was saying the local vet was telling them that they were having a hard time getting in supplies like that. I talked to someone else that works in the business and medical supply business, and they were having a hard time getting stuff. So I would suggest you get out there and stock up on that kind of stuff. You don't have to be a doctor, and you don't have to buy all the stuff for doctor stuff, but Band-Aids, bandages, gauze, sutures, all that kind of stuff. I would suggest doing that. If you don't have a perfect place to buy it, I tell you a good quick one is just going to the dollar store. Going to the dollar store and just buying, alcohol and peroxide and Band-Aids and have enough of them. We're not talking 1 or 2 boxes. If you took $50 or $100, which I know is a lot for some of you, that's a big chunk of your money. But if you're able to put back $50 or even $20 and go to the dollar store and just buy bandages and stuff, you'd come out of there with a lot. So that's another thing that I would strongly recommend you stocking up on. You should already have a stockpile of it, but I would say we're going to start seeing more and more of the effects of that. Another one that they're even talking about on the news, and that's feminine products. I've seen that being talked about. There's shortage of feminine products, or that it's going to get worse. Women, there are alternatives to disposable feminine products. I would certainly look into those so that you can have those stockpiled. You know the thing, okay? You get it. I don't have to go in any kind of detail, but as all you women are going to know, and you men, and have ladies, if you run out and you can't get that kind of stuff, it's going to be a pretty miserable experience. So make sure you have enough that you're not going to run out for that kind of stuff, or have a non-disposable alternative to that, because they're talking about that also being a problem. And then another thing that I wanted to mention is garden seeds and garden supplies. Now, in the 2020, we went through this garden seed shortage for a while, or at least it became a little bit harder to come by. I think, and I could be off on this, I think we're going to see a big boom. And I understand garden season, the planting season for a lot of people is kind of over, but like here, I'm getting ready to plant some second planting stuff. And so, you could still get food out, but I think that there's probably going to be a boom of garden seeds and garden tools, outdoor equipment type stuff to do this. And there's a couple of articles here that kind of are dancing around that subject. I would suggest you get some garden seeds. Make sure you have a good supply of them. Garden seeds, if stored properly, can last a very, very long time, even potentially longer than you'll live. There's been many accounts where garden seeds have been found in clay pots that are hundreds of years old and that they're still good. They will, their germination rates may drop, but you can still, if they're stored properly, cool, dark places, sealed, airtight kind of thing, they will last a long time. And then there are your things like garden tools, the tools that you need to do that. I know my tiller this year, I had to buy a belt for it. And let me tell you, the hard time that I had getting a belt for my tiller, it was kind of a nightmare. And ended up buying one that didn't work for it. It was the wrong size. I knew it was, but I was just hoping that it would work, and it didn't work. And I finally was able to track down a place that had one, because my tiller just happened to have a pretty unique size of belt. So that's another one that we need to be aware of, is the equipment that we use, folks. Make sure you have the supplies that you need, because it would, if you don't have a way to plant the stuff, you don't have the shovels and the rakes and all that kind of stuff, then it's going to make it pretty hard to plant your garden, okay? So, and the possibility of those things being bought up or shortages surrounding them is very likely also. So that is another one that you should probably be stocking up on. The point is, folks, is this is becoming a more real situation. I've seen in the last week YouTube channels, and I know this isn't necessarily a good gauge to everything, but I've seen YouTube channels. Some of them were kind of prepping channels, but they never got, you know, kind of crazy on talking about the world is coming to an end. It was more the real mild stuff. They're now talking about it. I've seen other YouTube channels that aren't even prepping kind of stuff. They're not even prepping or conspiracy or news, and they're talking about it. People everywhere are talking about it, folks. The shortages, the problems, the weather, everything. It's all happening. And then on top of that, we have this just complete destruction of our society, especially when it comes to the moral end of things. And that's a whole subject, another subject. And I have talked about it before, but it's like it's someone's kicked it into turbo. You know, this month is, you know, Rainbow Month, Pride Month, and it is absolutely over the top, the stuff that's happening. And no one seems to care because now this is accepted and normal. You put all this stuff together. I remember I made a video a year and a half ago, and I talked about this, and I've mentioned it a few times since. And I said it's like standing in front of a big mural. You've seen them, you know, big mural on the wall. If you stand real up close to it, where your nose is almost touching, you're only seeing just this little spot of the mural, and you have really no idea what you're looking at. And every time you step back, you start to take in more and more of the full picture. And when you do that with everything that's going on, and stop and not just look at one particular thing, you know, this is bad here, guns, you know, trying to take away guns, you know, the distractions in Washington, all the stuff that's going on. You put it all together. I think what we are, and I stand by this, I've stood by this for 2 years now. We're watching the collapse of our civilization. Doesn't mean it's going to end up like Mad Max. Lots of civilizations have collapsed. Japanese Empire, German Third Reich, Communist Russia, they all collapsed, but they didn't go to Mad Max territory. I think we are watching our civilization collapse, and what takes its place could be much worse than what we have right now. You should be watchful and watch the indicators, just like someone that plays around in the stock market, watching the indicators of our society, our civilization. You can see the things happening. And I don't think that anyone with a straight head and logical mind can look at it and say, everything's fine, it'll be okay, we'll go back to normal eventually, or this is good. We are watching the collapse of it all. So folks, continue to prepare these items that I mentioned: popcorn, medical items, tools, garden seeds, and then feminine hygiene products. Those are 4 items, extra items. If you haven't got them down on your list and you haven't stocked them away, you probably should, because I would say those are also either on or soon to be on the list of things that are hard to come by. Folks, get your houses in order. Prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.